hereby call to order the Village of Riverside Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting for Wednesday, July 23rd, 2025. And could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Clarkson?
Here.
Commissioner Braun?
Here.
Commissioner Matthews?
Here.
And Commissioner Kirk?
Here.
And
Oh, sorry.
Chairperson Hennigan?
Sorry. And I am here. We have a quorum. First on the agenda is approval of the Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting minutes of May 28th, 2025. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Does anyone have any changes? Hearing none, and please call the roll.
Commissioner Clarkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Braun?
Aye.
Commissioner Matthews?
Aye.
Commissioner Kirk?
Aye.
Chairperson Hennigan?
Aye. Motion's approved. That brings us to visitors, petitions, citizen requests, and communications. There is no one present, so we can move on to the next item, the liaison report.
Yes, on July 17th, the village board reviewed the text amendments that we'll discuss tonight, and they did recommend moving forward with the public hearing. They didn't have any comments on the amendments.
Thank you very much. So our first item of new business this evening is PZ 25-0003, a public hearing to consider various changes to the Village of Riverside zoning ordinance and municipal code. The petitioner is the Village of Riverside. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Sorry, motion passes. Notice of the public hearing was published in the Landmark on July 2nd, 2025, and will be marked as an exhibit. The remaining application materials will be marked as a second exhibit. Is there a motion to accept these exhibits?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Ann?
Okay. So just as a reminder, on May 28th, the PZC reviewed the amendments fairly extensively and provided feedback, which has been integrated into the amendments that you're looking before you. If you're looking at the memo, you can see on pages 1 and 2, you can see the section changed to the text amendment since the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. That includes just refining the language regarding the height of building height definition, the standards for decks, and there was a standard regarding relative gain that was changed. Staff also, let me back up a second. On June 12th, the Preservation Commission reviewed the text amendments and unanimously voted that they would not have a negative effect on the National Historic Landmark designation of the village or the general plan of Riverside, which is effectively their endorsement of the amendments. And as I mentioned, on July 17th, the village board reviewed the amendments. So the changes that have been made since the Planning and Zoning Commission last reviewed these amendments include 2 items that I had mentioned when we were prioritizing text amendments but failed to include in our prior review. The first is in minor text amendments, which is your attachment A. Staff recommends adding language to exempt village-owned buildings used for public services in the Riverside lawn area, specifically to exempt them from using the materials on the prohibited building materials list for residential districts. I'll go into that in a second. Actually, let me just go ahead and forward down to that. So this is a note here. The village has planned to build a new storage building on the public works site by the end of 2026. And the proposed building materials, it's a storage building, so they will be cinder block or a combination of cinder block and metal panels. Those are prohibited materials in the residential zoning district. And that area of the village, because it's not in a designated zoning district, it has to abide by the standards of the R1AA district, which is our residential district. So that R1A district includes a list of prohibited building materials that includes cinder block and metal wall panels. So basically, in summary, a variation would be required for the village to build a storage building at the public works site if it had to abide by these standards. So this amendment would be very specific. It would exempt this geographic area of the village. Just to orient you, this is just south of the Des Plaines River, south and west, I suppose, of the Des Plaines River. Here's Ogden Avenue. We're in Lyons. And if you've ever visited the public works site, you know it's down off of, I think, Columbus Boulevard or Columbus Street. Oh, yeah, there's Columbus Boulevard here. The storage building would be approximately in this area. The rest of this land is undeveloped and village-owned. So this would be the area that would be exempt. from the design standards for residential zoning districts. So, but it would only be for village-owned buildings used for public services. And again, the village board is going to approve the design of any building that the village builds. So we're very thoroughly protecting ourselves and allowing an option for public input on the design of the building. Were there to be ever a building built in this area, you know, that was used for village-owned, used for public services, you know, and it would have to go to the village board anyway. So there'd be an opportunity for public input.
Okay.
So that's something that we didn't discuss last time, but that's what effectively the exemption would allow. The other item that we didn't discuss and this is just some photos, just to give you some reference points of what the public works buildings look like. That's the left half of this building, or the back half, and then just a couple of storage buildings. The other is to remove language related or referring to the certificate of compliance process from the zoning code. The certificate of compliance process was updated earlier this year to remove a zoning review of the property as part of that property. It's a property transfer. So when properties are transferred, bought or sold in the village, folks have to obtain what's called a certificate of compliance. It's a property transfer. For a number of years, the village would require the village planner to review the property and list any zoning nonconformities on the property and provide a certificate of compliance to the seller, who would give it to the buyer at closing. That the zoning portion of that property transfer, the zoning review requirement was removed from the village code earlier this year, and so there's no real reason to refer to the village of the certificate of compliance process in the zoning code, because it has nothing to do with zoning at this point. And this text amendment would not have any effect on the changes that were made to that certificate of compliance process in the municipal code. It would just remove it from the zoning code. The village attorney recommended two changes, relatively minor changes, to the text amendment since you last reviewed them. The first is in the text and zoning map amendment section. It's to add this underlined language, and basically this is just providing some additional context for how the standards should be considered when reviewing text and zoning map amendments. So that the Planning and Zoning Commission Village Board should be guided by the principle that its power to amend the title is not arbitrary, but is exercised when the public good demands and requires the amendment to be made. So in considering whether it's that principle is satisfied, we're going to use these standards. So that's effectively what that language is saying. It's just a refinement of the language. And then after this agenda was published, and I just sent you an email about this and updated on the website in our agenda center, we added some language that was recommended in the subdivision section by the village attorney, and I'll review that. Everything in the packet that's online that has changed since what was originally published has been highlighted, just to make it a little bit easier to read. So we can skip through to the highlighted section, and that includes a couple of missed and lot combinations. So I caught most of these. I missed a couple of them, and so I noted those. And then we have the more substantive changes. We're down here in the lot combination section. So basically the procedures for, and this is based on the village attorney's recommended approach to this legally, is that the procedures for processing subdivision applications would apply to both subdivisions and lot combinations, but certain types of lot combinations would be exempt. So instead of our original proposal was to create two different processes, basically we'd have subdivisions and lot combinations. What the code would say is basically all of these are processed in the same manner. So you can see this language up here, should be processed in the same manner pursuant to the procedures listed. However, lot combinations that do not affect access rights, existing easements, or rights of way would be exempt from the subdivision requirements, and then shall be submitted to the Board of Trustees for approval, which was our recommendation, and shall be subject to a reduced fee, which is our recommendation. So those would be the three changes, is basically, and the lot combinations that we've seen recently that we've felt were maybe didn't need to go through the entire process don't meet any of these standards. They wouldn't affect access rights, existing easements, or rights of way. So if 121 South Coat Road was a lot combination of two residential lots, none of it would qualify for this reduced process. So, and I think that makes some amount of sense, and legally I think would be sound based on what the village attorney proposed. So if there is something affecting access rights, existing easements, or rights of way, it would go through the normal process. It would have the Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing, and then the ultimate decision by the village board. Are there any, those are the only changes that were made since the Planning and Zoning Commission last considered this. Are there any questions about the proposed text amendments? Sure.
I just have a question. It's more of a clarification, just going back to the first point.
Sure.
About the buildings in Riverside Lawn.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the Forest Preserve District owns Riverside Lawn now.
They own a good portion of it.
Okay.
So this portion
Okay.
is shown on the Forest Preserve website as being owned by the Forest Preserve.
Right.
Yeah, this section and over here, they own this section as well,
Okay.
across the river.
Where's the swinging bridge? Just
This,
for,
it would be up and over here.
Oh,
off the
okay,
map.
okay, okay.
Yep. So if you're coming down, there's that little Miller
Yeah.
Boulevard that connects the village to Ogden Avenue.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
So Riverside owns that?
I believe we do. It's not owned by the Forest Preserve. We certainly own these lots. I believe we also own these lots. I've been looking into it to verify that, but that's my understanding.
Okay.
And I could be wrong.
I'm just curious if we don't, if we don't own it outright, if it's not either part of the Village Riverside or owned, which is kind of weird that we have like a colony. It's kind of strange. But then do we have the right to impose zoning rules on something we don't own?
Sure,
But I mean, if
it's
we-
within our jurisdiction.
Okay.
It's within the village's jurisdiction, it's just not zoned.
Okay.
This is, this area is outside of the village's jurisdiction.
Yeah, so anything the Forest Preserve owns, we have no
Yep,
authority over.
we
so.
don't own it, we don't have any jurisdiction
That's good
over
to
it.
know.
Yep. But we do have jurisdiction over this area that the Forest Preserve owns.
Because it's within our.
Because it's within our
contiguous
boundaries.
borders.
Yep, and we
Okay.
can, if we wanted to zone that, we could, but there's no proposal to do that.
Okay.
But the amendments, though, that you're proposing only affects the orange shaded
That's
area.
correct.
It doesn't affect the Miller Forest Preserve area.
That's correct.
Okay.
We needed to geographically bound the area that we were applying the exemption to.
Yes.
And to be equitable in terms of zoning, you can't spot zone and say just this one parcel is exempt, so you've got to pick a geographical area that has some sort of, it's contiguous and makes some sort of sense why you'd be exempt. I think the lack of visibility from the rest of the village was one of those reasons. You can sometimes see the Public Works building, especially if the foliage is off the trees, but for the most part, it's pretty invisible from Riverside Road.
Okay.
All right, any other questions for Ann? Okay. I don't have any questions on the changes that have been presented, and thanks for incorporating all of our feedback from the May 28th meeting. Much appreciated. There's no one from the public to comment. So if no one has any further questions, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. That brings us to the discussion portion. Is there anything we'd like to discuss about these? All right, in that case, I'll take us through the standards for text amendments. Number one, the extent to which the proposed amendments promotes the public health, safety, comfort, convenience, and general welfare of the village. That's our intent here. Number two, the relative gain to the public as composed to the hardship imposed upon the applicants.
I think that's met.
Yes, agreed. The consistency of the proposed amendment with village plans. Yes, we've met that. The consistency of the proposed amendment with the intent and general regulations of the zoning ordinance. Yes.
Yes.
Whether the proposed amendment corrects an error or omission, adds clarification to existing requirements, or reflects some change in policy. That's exactly what we're doing here. Number 6, that the proposed amendment will benefit the residents of the village as a whole and not just the applicant, property owners, neighbors of any property under consideration, or any other special interest groups, and the extent to which the proposed use would be in the public interest and would not serve solely the interests of the applicant.
That's
Yes,
fine.
with that. Number 7, whether the proposed amendment provides a more workable way to achieve the intent and purposes of the zoning ordinance and the village plans.
It does.
Yes. Number 8, the extent to which the proposed amendment creates nonconformities. Hopefully, we'll be eliminating some.
Yeah.
I think we've met that. And number 9, the extent to which the proposed amendments are consistent with the overall structure and organization of the zoning ordinance. Yes, I think we've met that one as well. Is anyone prepared to make a motion?
I move to accept the zoning text amendments in their entirety as presented to us. Is that right?
That's great, thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Any additional discussion? In that case, Anne, could you please call the roll?
Of course. Commissioner Clarkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Matthews?
Aye.
Commissioner Kirk?
Aye.
Chairperson Hennigan?
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much. And our next item of new business is 2025 accomplishments and 2026 goals.
Yes. This was another item that I updated since it was published. This was, we have annual goals for the Planning and Zoning Commission. This includes the 2025 accomplishments, and then I added the first goal. And just a note in terms of the order, the first goal was added to reflect goal number 1 in the Parks and Recreation Department master plan that was recently approved by the village board, and the village board directed the Parks and Recreation Department to proceed with that, and I'll mention that in a second. The next 6 goals are listed in their order of priority based on the commission's discussion on March 18th of the next text amendments. And then the remaining goals were not specifically prioritized by the commission. So as we conclude our work on the first 6 goals, we'll add a discussion regarding prioritizing those goals to a commission agenda. So we have our 2025 accomplishments first, and then our 2026 goals, and the goal that was added by me was highlighted here. And so the goal is to consider designated preferred park uses with park land use and zoning guidelines based on land use classifications with the intent to guide future active and passive development decisions. So this would include considering defining the permitted land use for each designation of passive versus active, and have what types of development would be allowable, the percent coverage of site available for development, and development offsets. This was directly from the language in the master plan as recommended by Barry Dunn, the consultant who came up with the plan. And the intention is to have some sort of codified guiding document for what can be used in which park. So this is going to start with, and effectively in slightly more plain language, what the consultant is recommending is making a map of the parks and then listing the types of activities that are acceptable in the parks, so that there's some clarity on that. I know that there was some concern about the consideration of different spaces being considered for more passive recreation or passive enjoyment. Indian Gardens, for example, or Swan Pond. Now, Indian Gardens does have the scout cabin, and I think that there used to be a playground there. So there's, I think, some discussion and concern about what activities should be allowed where. And effectively, that's what this effort will do. If that would be included on the zoning map and in the zoning ordinance, so that would be included on the PZC's work plan. This would include input from the Parks and Recreation Commission, certainly, and the Preservation Commission. So that was a goal that was given to the Parks and Recreation Commission from the village board. So I added that to the work plan so we can focus on that item. And as we develop a plan, I will give you more information moving forward about when we'll be discussing that. All the rest of the goals, as I said, are in order that we had prioritized. The next 6, the driveway widths, excluding decks from building coverage limits, and all of these were, for the most part, in our last set of commission goals. Do you have any questions about the draft goals or
With the new goal about parks,
Mm-hmm.
so from what I can tell, the existing parks generally aren't within a zoning district?
That's correct.
Much like the Public Works facility?
Much like the Public Works facility.
Okay, so we'd be creating something special for those, or potentially creating a zoning district for parks?
Potentially creating a zoning district for parks, potentially just identifying the land within the zoning ordinance, and stating that there are special, that it's within, the R1A district, because it's not zone. So for public lands within the residential districts, these following rules apply to these specific geographic areas. So it could go either way. We could create a zoning district or not. I'm not sure what the most efficient way is at this point. And then identify and kind of divide up those activities between passive and active, and then determine, so you can list the types of activity or the types of development that would be acceptable. So leisure path seems like could be passive or active. Playground might be considered a more active use, ball field, an active use. Picnic table, bench, those seem like more passive uses depending on your perspective. And then basically decide for each park area which of these are acceptable, by right, meaning, you don't need any kind of special approval, or if you want to have, we have for certain uses within certain zoning district, a special exception process, or special use process, where you would say, it could be acceptable to have a more active type of recreation in this area, but we'll need to review that. And so that would go before, and that would be, I think we would review it anyway. This would be a formal process to go through the zoning process of Planning and Zoning Commission, Preservation Commission, Village Board, Parks and Rec, to have all the commissions provide input and then give their formal recommendation to the Village Board.
And maybe this is a basic question, but it's related specifically to structures or things that would be built there, or because it wouldn't cover activities, right? So if there's
Sure.
a passive place, but there's a group of kids running wild,
We are not going to police.
we
children.
aren't, but
No.
but
No.
is that the intent that other people will?
The intention
Okay.
would be, we're not policing how folks use things, but, if you built if you had an open space, we wouldn't certainly prohibit like a pickup game of baseball or something like that.
Right.
At least not through the zoning ordinance. But if you're installing things for a different type of recreation, so if you're installing a backstop and a pitcher's mound and, all the elements of a baseball field, is that the type of recreation we want to see on this site?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know that, I think there are a short list of improvements that the Parks and Recreation Department is intending to make in the near future that we know of. So there is, I believe the playground equipment at Trail Park needs to be replaced. I think the intention is to replace effectively in the same footprint that they have now. So that wouldn't be an expansion, that would just be replacing like for like. I think there was some consideration of some sort of leisure path connecting the area where the swim club is down to Swan Pond, and trying to figure out how to do that. And I apologize, I'm fuzzy on the details. This is not my area. But when I discussed it with the Parks and Rec director, he said, there's a couple of things that we have in the future, but the intention is, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, when we're discussing this, we have some sort of idea of, this was the baseline assumption of what these spaces were going to be used for. It can always be adjusted, like we do with text amendments. We can amend the zoning code and say, actually, we want to use these for different purposes and make that amendment to the code.
Okay.
I had a question about the proposed goal about nuisance lighting.
Sure.
Are there any other commissions or boards or groups within the village who are looking at lighting?
I know that's a concern that's been brought up in our sustainability discussions. So I'm not sure if that is going to be taken up in a different, possibly by a different effort in coordination with us. It's
Okay.
unclear at this point.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, comments, thoughts? It's a nice hefty list, some good goals.
And could you say more about the removal of parkway trees? Like, just sort of that goal overall?
Sure. I don't think that we had discussed that in depth. That was mentioned, I'm trying to remember when that was mentioned. That was on, it's on our goal for, it's on our goal and work plan for this year. And I think that could be more of an educational item than a revision to the code. So it could be that we consult with the village forester to discuss what the current mitigation efforts are and just make sure that they're aligned with sustainability efforts.
Okay,
Um,
thank you.
mhm.
Right, any other thoughts? Well, hearing none, I'm going to take that as a sign that we're all okay with these goals moving forward.
Okay.
And I forget, does the board adopt these as goals for us?
It's adopted as part of the budget.
Gotcha. All right. Very good.
Okay.
All right, so that is our last item of new business. We have no old business. Any information anyone would like to share? No?
The only, if I may,
Yes?
the only information that I have is that our next meeting is scheduled for August 27th. We do not have any applications on the agenda. So if we do have a meeting, it would be to consider a text amendment, depending on where we are in terms of research and priority. So I will keep you appraised.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, were we looking at moving the meeting time to 6:30?
That was a permanent change.
Permanent
I apologize
change?
that that was unclear.
All right, just need to update my calendar appropriately.
I know, it's-
And I remember saying, yes, this is a great idea, I'm all for it, but, all right.
Change is hard.
It is. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all very much.